Overwatering your garden can completely destroy your plants, but how do you know how much is too much water? In today's video, I'm going to share with you exactly how I know how much water to provide to my garden and how you can figure that out too. Let's go. Hey, and welcome back to Mini Urban Farm, a channel about gardening and homesteading in the suburbs. Today, we're going to be talking about how long you need to water your vegetable garden. So first, let's talk about how your plants are actually getting water. You're either manually watering your garden or you have a drip irrigation system in place like I do. I watered my garden for years and years. It was not until this past season that I was able to put in a drip irrigation system, which definitely had its challenges, but has been a complete lifesaver for my garden at least. So if you're manually watering your plants, you take your gardening can or your watering hose or whatever it is you're using to water your plants, and you basically pour out the water on top of your plants, it seeps into the soil, and then you move on to the next plant. But when you're using a drip irrigation system, it's a little bit more difficult to determine how long they actually need to get watered for because you're not physically seeing those plants absorb the water. You have to let those drip emitters and those micro sprinklers, whatever you want to call them, you have to let those do the work. So when you're starting out with drip irrigation, it is very easy to underwater or overwater your plants. Generally what happens is you overwater your plants just like I did because you think that the plants need more water than they actually do, since the drip emitters are giving out so little water at a time. I started off with watering my garden for about half an hour twice a day, which I didn't think was going to be so much, but it turned out to be way more than the garden needed, even in the middle of summer. It really didn't have great effects on the plants, and what I ended up finding was that the plants were turning yellow and then brown and ultimately dying. So after a few adjustments and watching the plants for a while, I was able to determine that my plants only really need about 15 minutes per day on the drip line, and then I even turn it off certain days. Those things will vary depending on how much rain you're getting. I mean, for a while here, we did not get even a drop of rain. I think it was like a month and a half, 2 months that we didn't get any rain at all. And then now we are like just making up for all of that. I am staring in front of me and there are black clouds, and I know it's going to rain again today. And it's been raining tons and tons every single day. So I have been turning off my entire drip system quite a bit actually. Alright, so let's talk about how you can figure out how much water your plants need, because the amount of water that you are going to need in your garden is very different than the amount of water I'm going to need. I have different plants than what you're planting out, more than likely. You have a different quantity than each of those plants, and you also have different conditions. When I'm thinking about how much water to start off with, I think about the season, right? We're in the middle of summer now, which means that water evaporates much quicker than when it's 30 degrees outside. I think about the types of plants that I have in my garden planted out currently. For example, I have a lot of tomato plants, and tomato plants really do like deep watering, so they don't need to be watered as frequently. Now, my entire garden is on a single drip system. I have one timer for the entire garden, which means that my tomato plants, they're gonna get watered the same number of times that my arugula plants or my salad greens or anything else that does not need infrequent watering. Things that need to be watered much more frequently are on the same drip system as my tomatoes, which don't need as much water. You're gonna have to find some sort of a healthy medium balance there between the types of plants that you have and the types of plants that you have on your drip system, the amount of water that they need. You're gonna have to balance it out ultimately at the end of the day. My tomato plants get the same amount of water as some of the other plants. The only difference is that I move around the emitters and I move around the sprinkler heads, the micro sprinkler heads, and the drip lines to where they're needed more, instead of decreasing the number of minutes or hours watered per plant. And the last factor you're going to consider is if you have an in-ground garden or if you have a raised garden bed garden. Now, as you can see behind me, all of my stuff is in raised garden beds or in pots, which means that the evaporation rate is much quicker in these types of gardens versus in-ground. In-ground, what happens is there's a lot more water underneath, right? If you start digging a hole, depending on where you are, eventually you'll hit water. We're in Florida, so you're gonna hit water pretty quickly if you start digging a hole here, and the ground is more than likely to be wet. I know that if I dig a hole maybe 6 inches down, I'm going to find probably a lot of wet soil, or at least very moist soil. So when you have the ground level that has a lot of water in it already, you don't need to be pouring tons of water for your plants. They're pretty much taken care of, which will reduce the amount of water that you need to provide to them. In a raised garden bed, it's very different though. My soil in my raised beds dries out very quickly. Therefore, I'm going to need to provide a lot more water than if it was an in-ground setup. All right, so how do you know what to start off with, right? You have to start somewhere. When you're setting your drip timer or turning it on and turning it off, you're gonna have to figure out where exactly you want to start. Now, my recommendation would be to start with once a day for about 15 to 20 minutes. That seems to be a decent amount, and then adjust from there. What will end up happening is you're either going to see your plants do very, very well and maintain a very bright green color, or you're going to see your plants turn a little bit yellow and somewhat brown if you don't catch it early. Now, this can be one factor. Another factor of whether or not you need to adjust your timer is if the soil is constantly wet, right? With the drip irrigation system, you're not going to have the benefit of seeing soaking wet soil on the top layer because your drip emitters are literally dripping into that specific place wherever the emitter is. So if you have micro sprinklers, for example, I have a micro sprinkler in the middle of every single one of my boxes and then drip lines on either end. What's going to end up happening is with micro sprinklers, you're going to see a lot of wet soil on the very top layer, but with the emitters, you might not see that because they're dripping directly into the soil. So you're not going to see that unless it rained, for example. Now, what you want to do is you're going to take your finger, right? You're going to take one finger, two fingers, whatever it is, and you're going to poke a hole right into the soil. Pretty much all the way down your hand, right? If you want, you can dig a little hole or something. I wouldn't recommend doing that because you're kind of disturbing the plant soil and the plant roots and all that. But just stick a finger or two into the soil. And if the soil is wet at about an inch, then you probably don't need to water your plants. You can probably keep it the same amount of watering as you have right now. Or if it's wet closer to the surface, you could probably decrease the amount of water that you're putting into your plants. What you're looking for essentially is that the top layer of soil, about an inch every single day, is pretty much dried out, right? With just a tiny bit of water coming up to that top inch of soil. If it's more than that, if it's completely saturated, you probably want to turn your system down, right? Even to every other day, 20 minutes, or decrease the watering on a daily basis to maybe 10 minutes and just play around with it from there. If you're seeing signs of overwatering, for example, yellow leaves, browning leaves, your leaves coming off the plants, things like that, if you're seeing that and there's no other really rationale for it, your plants aren't diseased, it's clearly a sign of overwatering, then you want to adjust your drip irrigation system. Like I said, I started off with half an hour twice a day from things I read online. I just, took a guesstimate, and that guesstimate turned out to be way too much. I made an entire video on overwatering the vegetable garden when I set up my drip system. So clearly that was way too much water for the garden. Now, I have since decreased and turned off my system significantly more, and my plants, as you can see, are mostly green now and they're starting to come back. I went ahead and pruned off everything that was overwatered. Any plants that had like yellow or browning leaves, things that looked very sick, I took those off and I let the sprinkler system, I let the irrigation system take a little bit of a break. I can't control how much it's been raining, unfortunately. It has been raining a ton here, but on the days that it does rain, I just keep my system off for multiple days at a time, and the plants seem to be doing much better with that. Now, I might still go ahead and adjust it a tiny bit because a lot of the rain will stick around for a little bit since it hasn't been super hot when it's on a cloudy day, but as the temperatures continue to heat up, which they definitely will, then I'll go ahead and reduce the amount of water that I'm giving to my plants. So currently you can see my timer is set to off, right? This is where it's on all the time, and that's the off setting. Now, I turned it off this morning because it was going to rain. I could have just go ahead and pressed the cancel watering. If I press the cancel watering, it gives me the option to select how many like hours I want. I don't think it'll do it because the whole system is off right now. But if I set it to auto, for example, you can see that for right now, my system is set to Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday, and Sunday. That was because we were on vacation, and it was set to rain a lot, right? And you can see there it turned to 15 minutes. So you can see the days, it's 15 minutes, and it's only once per day right now because we're on vacation. Normally I have it for twice a day at 10 a.m. and at 5 p.m. Recently it's just been that once a day, but the plants seem to be doing pretty well. So if I wanted to, I could come back in here and set more days. I could set less days, whatever it is that you want to do for your system. For right now, it has been pretty much off because it has been pouring rain on a daily basis for the past week and a half. And then when I set it back to auto, I might just keep it at that once every other day-ish kind of platform for right now because it has been raining and because it did so well like that when we were on vacation. Alright, so I hope that video was helpful for you. I know it was definitely a challenge for me to figure out exactly how much I should be watering my plants, and I'm still adjusting it almost on a daily basis. Something that I really like to do is when I walk the garden in the morning, I just kind of take note of, if the plants are showing a little bit of signs of overwatering or if the top layer of soil is still wet, things like that, and then once a week I'll go and I'll adjust it for the week, let that sink in for a little bit, and then readjust as needed. Unfortunately, there's no one size fits all, and you're going to have to adjust until you get to the amount of water for your specific garden, and then that will probably change because the conditions, the temperature, the season, all of that stuff just keeps evolving. And as your plants grow, they also grow deeper roots, so they're able to access a lot more water in the soil than when they are very, very small seedlings. I hope this video was helpful. If it was, don't forget to like and subscribe, and I will see you in the next one. Thanks for watching.